Hey folks, welcome to the Famcast. This is Kyle Freedman, and just wanted to give a quick intro. Over these next couple of podcasts, we're going to be talking about parenting, and we know that this looks different for a lot of different people. Some of you might have two parents in your home. Maybe you are a single parent. Wherever you find yourself, whether you are together with someone or single, community is huge. And so you're going to hear from myself and my wife on this podcast, and that's the way that we have done it because that's been our reality. But know that it doesn't happen without community. And so we encourage you, listen, take some of the principles of it, no matter where you find yourself, but find others that are going to walk with you, that are going to love you, that are going to help you, because parenting is too hard to do alone. So we hope that this is encouraging. We hope that it's helpful. Enjoy the Famcast. All right. Hey, welcome to the Famcast. We're glad that you tuned in today. Just know this is just a gathering of real folks that love students, that love kids, love parenting. And we're just real people with real lives, with real messes that are trying to point our kids to Christ. And so hopefully what you hear today, what you see today, it's helpful and encouraging. That's what we truly wanted to be. And so we've spent a little bit of time talking about Andy Stanley's book, Parenting. We kicked in. If you haven't listened to the previous podcast, we kicked that off. Encourage you to tune into that, but wanted to come back to that today because there's something in there that I have really loved throughout the years and looking at the different stages of parenting. And he describes it in his book as there's the discipline years, which is 0 to 5. There's the training years, 5 to 12. The coaching years, 12 to 18. And the friendship years, 18 plus. And I think it's real easy for kids to flow in and out of these different stages. But I think for parents, it can be more difficult. So I know you guys have kind of read the book as well. So what were you thinking about as you kind of came on the different stages of parenting? I guess, what's your favorite stage?
Oh, you go, Rachel.
Well, I only have 2 to choose from.
Yeah.
I know.
I only have the discipline years and the training years. And to be honest, I'm not sure that I knew that I was in 2 different stages of parenting.
Oh, that's right.
So
yeah.
that was very helpful to read it and be like, oh, I am on the cusp of, I'm no longer disciplining with right and wrong, and more like, hey, what if we tried this time? Or what if we tried this with my oldest? Because I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So we're right in the middle of those 2.
So
I think I'm going to like the friendship years.
Yes.
Can we work towards that?
Yes.
Though?
Yeah, you can work.
Okay.
Again, parent with the end in mind, right?
Yes.
You want to be friends with your kiddos at the end of this. Now, I guess just talking about like the discipline years, like let's define, like what is that? What's the discipline years? That's basically strengthening them, strengthening their obedience through reps. So it's that continuing over and over again and correcting at different points. Hey, don't touch that. Why, Mom? Don't touch that. Dad, can I do that? No. Like it's that. I always describe it. It's probably the most physical in that year, in those stages, just trying to follow them around and make sure that they don't break themselves or something.
For the end
they
of
live,
the day.
yeah.
I actually really loved the discipline years. That was kind of a sweet spot for me. I really it's so fun. You can play games. You can, practice that first time obedience. Hey, Mommy says go over there and bring back the ball, and then I want you to practice bringing it right to Mommy right away, and that kind of thing. We would play games with them all the time, and you don't have to even make it punitive. You can just really reward that, hey, you listened, you did it right away, just when Mommy asked, because it's important to do it in that kind of setting with practice, so that in that time when you really, for safety's sake, need something to happen right away, they're used to listening to your voice and responding right away. I think about those years as you're not even giving so much of the why. You're practicing just listening to the authority in the room, who God has given them to be the authority in the room,
right? And
learning how to respond right away. So often, even now when I'm way outside of the discipline years, I think about what I would have what I say to my kids is like, this is a yes ma'am situation. Like this isn't a think about it or ask questions. This is just mom said I do.
Well, because sometimes they got to be able to respond, because they could be like in a spot that could be dangerous for them physically,
exactly.
and they have to learn.
Paxton this week learned that tools don't go into the electrical outlets.
Yes.
But thankfully we had a pop-up to reinforce what mom said, because he's like, nothing happened to me, I'm fine. And so we had a pop-up that came around and taught him all about crispy critters.
Yes. And during the discipline years, they are sponges. Like this is probably some of their most formative years. Even though you can't have a conversation with them and they can't understand it, you're building some of the blocks in that. Like you don't reason is what you're not going to reason with an infant.
You're right.
Why you should do this or why you shouldn't do this.
But there are those times when you're just enjoying each other's company, and you can talk about the why. And you can have those kind of back and forth conversations about why things are important, just like the electrical outlet. Like in the moment, this is a right away, I need you to stop. And you would raise your voice and you would make sure they understand that this is a big deal. But then later you can like have that conversation, you know, with pop.
And I think in this and throughout a lot of them, it's important to be consistent. Like what you're saying, how you're saying it. Always, again, we're fighting for relationship more than we're all fighting for rules. But we are in that. We've got to have a consistent voice so it doesn't waver in and out of that. And like the discipline years then lead into the training years. And the training years for this is now we're going to begin to put in, as a parent, I'm going to train you how to become an adolescent. I'm going to train you, but I'm also going to explain some of the why behind it. Like, and I think in this phase or this stage, this is where we begin your family values even begin to start coming out in some of these instances. So what in the training phase do you guys see as important?
So I think this is a super important phase and should be started probably in the discipline years, but where you have these things that you say, like the Freedman family is out, like we're getting our family together. Like you have these ways that you make your family feel like an entity unto itself. And this is what the Freedmans do. This is what we do in this situation. And, you know, we would always have things like, oh, good thing we share in this family. And surprisingly, they would always be like, oh, okay, we share. So this is what we're doing right now. But we would just have like these little catchphrases and little things that we would do to build family identity. And that's super important during those training years, because you want them to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, but something that's awesome that they want to be part of. And so part of the training is like training towards that identity, but also like training towards that's just not what we do in our family. And that's okay. And that's when you're going to start getting so-and-so's mom, you know, lets him. And, you know, you just have a very short supply of like sort of like few word answers that you always use in every situation there. And if you and your spouse can kind of get on the same page with some of those, and you can say the same things. Like I've heard Rachel and Matt do this too. And like their kids will come at them with like a question or something like that. And either you or Matt will say like this little stock answer that you have to answer that question every single time. And, you know, it saves you some pain too. Like you're in those moments when you're unsure, you don't know what the decision needs to be, or when you're feeling stressed, that you, in your mind, you're like, oh, I always say this. Like the answer is always.
Well, I have a dear friend that their family always gives before they receive on Christmas. So they serve on Christmas Eve as a way to do it. And so it can be fun things too. Like in the training years, you're training into them. This is how our family is going to be. Like sometimes it feels like you're sticking in the discipline years and this is what our family's not going to do. But you can train in those good things as well. Or like reading the Bible or memorizing scripture. You know, whatever those values are. Again, you
don't
probably want to talk. Don't hit your sister. we have all of those in our house, and with 2 boys and 2 girls, you also
we did.
have that role.
Completely.
We're gentle in this family.
That would be like, you know, like the girls would just come up and just slap the fire out of them, and then they were coming back at it, and I was just like, the boys would come back, and there. I remember during these times, there would be times where I would just have to like get in the middle and go, we don't do that, but they hit me. I know that.
And they shouldn't.
I'm gonna have a talk with them right after this.
Yes.
But we don't hit girls.
Yeah.
Like, you don't respond in that way to them. Yeah. And yes, you're not going to get the revenge in this.
Yeah.
Let me talk to them after this. But this is something that we don't do.
Yes.
Another one of ours was like Freedman's finish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Finish what you do. So it was always like Freedman's finish. And so I'll hear him say some of that stuff. Like, there'll be something that'll happen and they'll go, Freedman's finish, Freedman's finish. So like,
surprisingly, we also have the marathon version of that.
Yeah.
Is we do not DNF, which is do not finish.
Yeah.
Because marathoners,
good.
if they don't finish, they'll get a DNF as their time. And Matt's like, oh no, we don't do that in our house.
We don't do that. Yeah.
We'll always cross the finish line.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. And like with everything, none of these are like hard and fast. But if you kind of have those, like, this is our principle, these are our principles.
Yeah.
Then you can have time for those little side conversations of, actually, I'm not going to make you finish this one little thing.
Right.
Because Daddy didn't realize it was going to be too hard for you. Or we're going to finish this together.
Yeah.
And there are ways that you can get around that. So nothing is like you have to. But I think the cool thing is that those kinds of things travel through the stages of parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to the coaching years, you're sort of enjoying the fruit of some of that.
Yeah.
And that was a trickier transition for me, and I wonder if there are other moms who the coaching years, like going from the training years to the coaching years, might be a little trickier because you do have to stop saying so much and sort of let them screw some things up.
Yep.
And I think moms and dads are going to struggle with that. I just wonder if it might be something that moms would.
Yeah. And I think that's where, because when it moves into the coaching stage, and this is probably my favorite stage, go figure. But I love it from the standpoint of, this is where you're giving them plays and saying, now you got to go out onto this field and you got to you got to perform it. Not perform it, but you got to carry them out. Yeah. Sometimes that means that, but the coach doesn't leave the field. Like, the coach is still on the sidelines of the field of going like, okay, hey, I'm watching you play. I'm watching some of this play out. I'm going to give you some tips. There's other times where you're going to have to pull them to the sideline for a little bit and go, hey, we need to work on this and practice a little bit more before you get back into game time. Yeah. But it's not, I'm going to go do it for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to coach you of this is how you should go. But then ultimately it's going to be up to you.
Right.
And this is when they're moving from middle school and high school are squarely in the middle of coaching, a little bit of the training years, depending on where they're at in school. And they're moving from this concrete, way of thinking to abstract. They're trying to figure out who they are. And this, man, I loved this so much because I had the opportunity, my daughter, when we were in Colorado, I was the one that got to take her to school every day. And so it was, I took her and I picked her up. I had the flexibility to be able to do that. And so every day it was engaging in some of those conversations of like, hey, how did school go today? And not just settling for, oh, it was good. Well, okay, who did you sit with at lunch today? What did you talk about today? How'd that make you feel? Like, going through all that stuff, those would be our car rides, to the point where in college, when they would get tripped up or there would be a hard spot, it was easy. It was easy for them to talk to me at that. Yeah. But it was those moments that happen when you're coaching, you're not rescuing, you're not bailing out. Yeah. I've always said, man, if they're going to fail, let them fail while we have the most voice in their life. And that's now. Yeah. And so it's like, that doesn't mean that there's no rules and there's not anything that you can just do whatever you're going to do. It means that these are the values. If you're going to go against what that is, there might be some failure in there. But the amazing thing is that their failure doesn't determine our relationship and the way that I feel about them. And so we can love them. And again, that's a portrait of what God does with us every single time that we fail, that we mess up, that we give them grace. That's what God does for us. And so I think it's this picture of how God loves us in that. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I love the coaching because this is more about connecting than it is about correcting.
So the important thing during the coaching years is like helping them talk through, like, how are you going to talk to your teacher about that? Yeah. Or how are you going to talk to that friend about that? And let's practice it. Like, let's practice talking through, like, what are you going to say and what does that look like? And then you can say, well, you might say this You know, you don't have to say it the way you would say it, but that's when you're talking through those kinds of like relational and social issues that all of them are going to go through.
Yeah.
Andy and Sandra talk about in this stage, you need to practice your face.
Your poker face.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how you can shut down doors if you're unwilling to listen to the craziness that they've come home with.
Yes.
And how our face can really give them a glimpse into like, oh, they'll tell you more depending on how your face looks.
Completely.
Has there ever been a time when you didn't practice a face and your kids were like, oh, we're never going to tell you about that awesome party we went to last night?
Yeah.
I have some. So every now and then, now that the kids are driving, excuse me, they'll come home and they'll tell me a situation they were in driving, and then they realize as they're saying it, because of my face, that maybe that was information I did not need to know, that they parked in a shadowy corner with no street lights, or that they pulled out into traffic without checking first. And so,
or they hit 85 miles per hour.
Exactly.
The Freedman kids have never done that. The Freedman kids
actually have. They do things like that all the time. But it's like, as they're saying it, they realize this is not information that my mother needs to know right now, and they'll realize they like want to pull it back. But you know, you want to just kind of save the you want to be approachable, and so like I don't know that we always do great at this, but your kind of response needs to be more like a tell me more response, or how did you feel about that response, or what did that make you think, instead of just what you did, what you want to be more like, you know, reserved.
And I think giving them, like, being able to say, hey, if you make this decision, if this is where you want to go, ultimately it's up to you. Because I think as you progress in the in these stages, as a parent, you've got to take steps backward and be able to go present the options, but then have them, through their own value system that they're adopting, they need to work out what that is. Because if they just have our values, when they go off to college, when they go into the workplace, then it's like, we don't have a big voice in that.
Right.
And if they don't know how to navigate that and they don't know where they're at, it could lead to some really hard times. But if they already know this is what I value, it becomes rock solid. Anytime they adopt their own values, that's when they really begin to stand on them. And so I think we've got to be able to step back even when it feels hard to do that. And you don't want to do that. We've got to ultimately do that, because in the end, again, the end game comes at, they're going to be able to navigate what's ahead of them because their values are already set and they have adopted their own.
Well, and that does come sometimes with them screwing things up and making a bad decision.
Completely.
And that's why, like, through those stages of parenting, you have built the relationship so that they know they can come to you and say, hey, this happened. And it actually didn't go well, but that you have that relational collateral built up so that they feel safe to say that, even if they know the decision they made was against what you would have made. And then your response there is just, oh, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry it turned out like that for you. I was hoping it would work.
Right.
But, you know, let's talk about how we can fix that. But the cool thing is that, like, all of those hard years of parenting just kind of blossom into the friendship years, which is the stage we're entering now with 3 out of 4 of our kiddos. And it's so delightful. And they still need some coaching sometimes, and they still ask for some coaching sometimes. But we're also taking even a step back from the coaching some and waiting for them to ask for it versus just, well, we're working on that. We're learning how to stop just offering the coaching. We're learning how to, like, wait for them to ask for it. And then it's much more about the friendship and the relationship. But all of these stages, it's so important to remember that you kind of have to have that in your mind, because if you try to pour friendship into the discipline years, you're going to mess things up. If you try to pour discipline into the coaching years, you're going to mess that up. Like, you have to kind of keep your phases straight so that you know what they need in that time. And there's crossover as you come between them, but you need to just make sure, hey, this is the season where all I'm offering is coaching here. it's not time for me to be, sending them to their room to stay for 10
right.
minutes. Like that time is done now.
Correct.
And now we're coaching and helping them figure out how to deal with their own consequences that have happened.
Well, and okay, so is there a time when you guys maybe haven't known you had transitioned into the next stage, and were there people that kind of were able to help you? Did you guys have active small groups? Did you have mentors? Like, what was that?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of close this idea up, because community is where it's at. Like, we struggle as parents sometimes to leave these seasons. Like, it's so hard for me to think that the coaching years are ending and we're like, it's how great to have an empty nest, but how horrible to have an empty nest. So that's where we are, but that's why we need community. We need community around us in the discipline years, when every day is so long and every night is so long, but the years are so short. And we need community around us to help remind us of the truth and just like keep us focused. And I need people in my life who might say, hey, I don't know if that's a great idea. Like, maybe you might think about, not grounding for that, or, maybe you should think about grounding for that, and that kind of thing. So just, having that community around to help keep us centered on the truth.
Most definitely.
And small groups and.
Yeah. And I think I think every kid needs other voices that are speaking truth and potential into their life and over their life, because they're going to be able to say some things that maybe we as parents have said over and over and over again.
Like a small group leader.
They come back from a small group and go, oh, do you know how wise Brett is? Like, or he said this and it just clicked for me. And I'm like, inside, my parent inside of me is going, wait a second. I want credit for that. I've been saying the same thing over and over again. And that's where my poker face has got to come in and just go, you know what? Brett, he is.
Yeah. He is so wise.
He is so, I'm so glad.
Aren't we so grateful that we're not the only people that are saying it so that they get it?
Completely.
Yeah, so kind of our idea with our kids is we want other people saying to our kids the things that we would say. We want other people loving them like Jesus loves them. And it doesn't have to just be my voice, because Jesus loves them through all those other people who keep them safe and loved and in the community of believers.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I think one last thing I think one of the hardest stages for parents is when your kid goes off to college and then comes back, or goes off to work or is living at the home during that phase. I think that's the hardest time for parents to be able to back off in some of those ways and to truly be a friend and not still want to control. And I think that's a difficult stage, but I would say for parents that are in that phase, the more that you back off, the more your kids will come to. Like, I think when we begin to give them freedom to be in that stage and to have that freedom to be able to make those decisions, and that, you don't need my permission anymore, the more that they will seek out your permission, the more they will seek out your advice. And so if we can be quiet and be a friend and come alongside in a lot of those areas, we'll get what we want, but we're not going to get that way if we continue to push. So it's not easy.
No. It's messy.
It's not easy.
Messy.
Each kid is unique. Each family is unique, no matter where you find yourself, whether it is two parents together, whether it's a single parent, wherever you find yourself, it's hard because we live in a broken world.
Yep.
But we have a God that says, I'm going to come alongside you. I'm going to provide people to come alongside you. And I want you to do life together in community. And we do the best that we can. And then we trust the Spirit for the rest of it. And I think that's ultimately where we need to land and just rest in that, Well, thanks so much for joining us. We hope that you tune in next time for Hope Famcast. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.